Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I am Murtazan. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is titled Circular Economy in the Global Value Chains. Do European Union policies boost its implementation? This is the first joint webinar between the Interact and the Erasmus Jean Monnet Center of Excellence in Sustainability. For today's webinar, we have two distinguished speakers. First, we have Dr. Manuel E. Morales. Dr. Morales is a researcher at the Rocher team Interact at the School of Economics and Business, Kaunas University of Technology. He holds a PhD in economics from University Clermont-Ferrand and a postdoc at the Industrial Bioeconomics Chair in Manova Business School. He has scientific interests in sustainability, industrial economy, circular economy, natural resource management, and environmental engineering. He also applies multi-layer modeling, network analysis, and system dynamics as methodologies to simulate desirable future scenarios. As a second distinguished speaker for today's webinar, we have Dr. Edward Nedelcher. Dr. Nedelcher is a researcher at the Erasmus Jean Monnet Center of Excellence on Sustainable Development. He holds a PhD in Environmental and Natural Resources from the University of Iceland and another PhD in Physical Geography from Stockholm University. His research is at the nexus between global food security, sustainable natural resource management, and economic transition. He uses system thinking and system dynamics modeling to evaluate the sustainability implications of the current socioeconomic systems and to assess intervention scenarios into the future. So without further ado, let us get us started with the webinar itself. So Dr. Morales and Dr. Nedelcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Morteza, for this very sharp presentation of our bios. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Nedelcher for participating in this webinar. That it's, as Morteza just said, is the first joint effort to discuss about this issue, this hot issue, that it's a circular economy, and the approach that we're going to take in this precise lecture is thinking about circular economy and the implications in the value chains, and in a macro scale perspective, because we're going to talk also about the European policies, and if these European policies are busting or are not busting the implementation of circular economy in Europe. So let's start. I will try to give my ideas, my lecture during the first 20 minutes, and then Dr. Nedelcher will follow to leave some time for discussion, 15 or 20 minutes at the end, to have a discussion and answer questions. So let's start. Okay. So first of all, we're going to try to address two main questions during this webinar. The first one is about the level of readiness of circular economy. But we're gonna see that there are different levels of readiness of circular economy according to the economic sectors, but also according to the structure of the different countries and the value chains that are linked to specific structures of those countries. Now, the second question that we are going to address here is about the state of the art on the implementation of circular economy on the global supply chains, and why circular economy is now gaining momentum in the political agenda, not only in Europe, but also around the world. So in order to better get into this topic, we need to define two main concepts. The first concept is about circular economy, what circular economy means in this case, at least. And the second big definition is about value chain. So circular economy could be and can be defined by two by two main cases. For example, according to their principle and also according to the object of analysis. So we can say that circular economy, according to their principles, could be categorized in three different fields. The first of those categories is closing and extending loops, which means recycling mainly, but also participating in industrial symbiosis as a strategy to extend different use of byproducts. The second of the categories is eco-efficiency, which means mainly getting more productivity with less resources, put it into the productive lines. And the third of these principles is the intensifying the loops. And this means looking for different ways to intensify the smart use of infrastructure, sharing functionality, and so on, discovering new business models or new circular business model. And the second way to recognize or to identify circular economy that we're going to handle here is about the object of analysis. So we identify according to the literature review, because we did last year systematic literature review for the last 10 years. We identify 5 main categories according to the object of analysis of circular economy. And the first one is the business model. The second is product and components. Facilities is the third one. Materials and processes is the fourth. And finally, we deal with energy. And we're going to see in the next slide why this is important. Because we also identify for those 5 categories that there are some differences in the level that they are approached. We have 3 different levels or main levels of approaching the issues or the problems regarding the circular economy. For example, the macro level, the meso level, and the macro, meso, and micro. So those are 3 different levels of approaching circular economy according to the object, but also those include different methods and different tools of analysis. And this is really relevant for this matter because according to the literature review that we already did from the last 10 years, we identified that there is a gap. There is a gap in the studies approaching circular economy from a macro perspective. There are only few studies in the sectors of biomass, bioproducts, and food and energy production that are approaching circular economy from a macro level. And this is mainly because those are considered as commodities. But we cannot identify really many relevant studies approaching circular economy from a macro perspective. And here we can see some of the macro chains into the value chains. So extraction, production, also the design, the consumption, and the identification of needs and requirements. Okay. The second concept that is important to identify or to clarify here in order to get a better understanding of circular economy in a macro perspective is value chain. So here we're considering value chain as the interconnected supply chains within territorial boundaries. It means that we're embedding these supply chains into a specific territory or region, and the final end of this value chains are to secure the provision of goods and services to society. And here we have a diagram, and one of the important things here is to answer one question, because we already know that according to the theoretical framework, we know that two different products will have a different value. And we also know that the same product, for example, but produced in different countries, could have different values. But the third question, which is important here, is to realize that the same product produced in the same country and with the same in the same value chain could also have different value regarding the calculations, because of the purpose and the functionality that it's intended to accomplish. For example, even if it has the same biophysical characteristics, the biophysical features, it will have a different HS, harmonized system code, if this is considered as waste, or otherwise if this byproduct is considered as a byproduct and it's intended to be looped or incorporated into a productive process of another productive line. So this will, as we will see further in another diagram, this will change the way in which we consider the importance of the value chains regarding the circular economy. Okay, so for that matter, it's also relevant to realize that we, in the last 10 years, we have moved forward, we have progressed in the data collection and the data gathering of European institutions, because in the last 10 years we have developed a set of really important thematic issues in the Eurostat, for example, regarding production and consumption, waste management, secondary raw materials, and also competitiveness and innovation. And these four thematic issues are part of the circular economy indicators that are showing the pathway in order to get a better decision making based on data-driven decision making. So this is really important to know about the further about the new data sets that are getting available. Okay, here we have an example on how value chains in a global understanding are going to change the social, are dependent on the social political frame in this case. So here we have the iron value chain, or it's a case study, and we can identify that according to the level of complexity of some of the chains, some of the steps of this value chain will change according to the product that is through at the end. So we have extraction steps that are taking place in China, for example, but we have also intermediate steps that are the semi-finished iron products. All those are for the construction industry. And what is important here to remark is that, for example, the final products here, regarding the bars and rods, which have we have identified that they have a bigger potential of implementation of circular economy strategies, according to the literature and the evidence that some studies are shown now. And this is because the level of complexity that is applied in the last or the later levels of the value chain have the potential to be reincorporated in the same country, for example, through maintain and reuse, if you want to keep those those waste or byproducts into the country in France, or they can also be sent back into Ukraine as a way of remanufacture, as shredded waste of scrap and iron when it is fragmentized. But also they have also the possibility to be recycled and send it back into China. We'll also show here, which is the previous linear economic paradigm, which is intended to send the waste and scrap iron into Turkish, which is what usually happens or used to happen, because then in Turkish they are not always given a value-added procedure. So the question here that we try to analyze or to give some thoughts on that is why in the same value chain, in the same value chain, but also in different sectors, we have different levels of readiness and different levels of implementation of circular economy strategies. Is that have something to see with the value chain structures on itself? And one of the potential answers that we're going to further study, of course, but the evidence suggests that in the levels of production in the value chain where there are more complexity, technologically speaking, human resources are have more capacity building in order to implement those circular economy strategies, is more the propensity to have this implementation of circular economy is higher. For example, we can see from the previous case study about the iron production, we can see that in France, for example, which is this red circle, the final products, which are those that we identified with a higher propensity to implement circular economy strategies, is much bigger. The share of the economy structure in comparison with this small circle, which is the semi-finished products. But in the other case of Ukraine, we can see the opposite. They are producing at the macro level, they are producing much more semi-finished products to be sold outside than the finished products. And this could have some impact on the capacity and propensity to implement those circular economy strategies. Those structural complexity indexes are taken from an atlas of economic complexity made from Harvard Growth Lab in 2000, in the last year. Okay, so I will finish here my intervention and leave the floor to Ed, just giving some final thoughts about the requirements, about the necessity to implement some transparency measures and also digital transformation if we want to upgrade the capacity of some sector and some steps in the value chain, some chains into the value chain to be able to implement more adequately, more in a better way the circular economy strategies according with the level and the direction also. I mean, not only the level of analysis, it's important when we talk about macro, meso, and micro level, but also the direction of those strategies. And when we talk about the direction, we have in mind the top-down strategies and also the bottom-up. With the top-down, we are talking mainly about policies, regulations, and how those policies and regulations are influencing the implementation of those circular economy strategies. And the bottom-up, which are also complementary, are the market-driven and the company initiatives that are also pushing forward through this transition in Europe. So that's all from my side. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manuel. And thanks a lot for the invitation. Thank you, Morteza, for the introduction. And hello to everyone who's here. I see there's quite a lot of people, so I hope we'll have a nice discussion afterwards. I will share my screen now. Great. Can you see it? Yep.
Yeah.
Great. So I wanted to talk a bit more about the policy that we've been seeing on circular economy in the EU and how this has been progressing so far. And we can look at the first circular economy action plan back in 2015, and this was pretty much based on, let's say, quantified material flow. I looked a lot at sectors such as waste, secondary raw materials, water, plastics was already a big thing back then, food waste, and critical raw materials, which are also important to mention. The EU Commission has been coming up with periodically revised lists of critical raw materials, as in the EU we are pretty much dependent on most of the materials we need for key sectors, such as the information and communication technology, renewables, and so on. This was followed by a circular economy package in 2018, which brought a much needed monitoring framework for circular economy, more reporting on critical raw materials, again, plastics, a big thing, and we start to see this interface between chemicals, products, and waste legislation. And a very important piece of legislation of policy came in 2019 with the European Green Deal. I say it's an important big piece of policy because it's not only very complex, its complexity goes into really all of the economy, but it also has a huge budget. It has a third of the EU budget. And here we start to see a bit of an understanding that we need to integrate more than just material flows into the circular economy. And we see an accent on ecological well-being. We see the health aspect going there into the healthy and affordable foods. And a bit more on the social side, we also see future-proof jobs. So the recognition that the Green Deal, the circular economy, those are pushing towards a transition in the economy that will require a change in skills that will have different impacts on different regions and communities, and those need to be taken into account. And then this can be seen more clearly in the latest Circular Economy Action Plan from 2020. We see a reorientation a bit towards also some of the key sectors that we need for decarbonization, for instance, again, electronics, batteries, and vehicles. We know we are shifting from uh, internal combustion vehicles to electric vehicles, so that's a big step. And of course, there are pushes to do that for road cargo transport. And again, plastics in the food and water, which were already there in 2015. So those major pieces of policy, they're also connected to additional policies and strategy links, such as the eco-design working plan, which resulted into the 10 eco-design implementing regulations. So really how to design longer lasting products, more reliable products, and products with a lower material footprint also. We had a revised legislative framework on waste, also revised fertilizer regulation, which in 2019, which really incentivized a secondary market for fertilizers based on organic fertilizers and recycled fertilizers. We had a directive on single-use plastics in 2019, and also strategy links to the chemical strategy, industrial strategy, plastics, and zero pollution action plan. So the newest circular economy action plan is comprised of 35 actions, which could be really further characterized into 7 broader sectors. So we have the sustainable product policy framework, which looks a bit more now to empowering consumers, the right to repair. So we start to talk about repairability and durability of products. It also looks at green public procurement, which is important and where member states have more power. Again, we're talking about key product value chains. We're talking about circular electronics initiatives, batteries, again, very important. Waste oils, end-of-life vehicles. We're heading towards that if we want to transition from internal combustion to electric vehicles. And of course, the built environment. We have the less waste, more value. So there is an understanding that we need to decrease the huge amounts of waste we're producing. And also end of waste and byproduct criteria. And then we can see here in making circular economy work for people, regions, and cities that there is a recognition that we need a skills agenda. We need to make sure that people can be retrained and that some of the sectors that will whose importance will diminish in this transition, or they will disappear altogether. People working there, they need to be able to find jobs somewhere else. And this is also connected to the just transition mechanism, which again recognizes that some communities will be more affected than others in this transition process. There are cross-cutting actions with climate change, carbon removal, and the state aid on environment and energy. Again, the Commission is trying to lead efforts at the global level through an agreement on plastics and a global circular economy alliance. So it's good to see that there is this proactive approach. And of course, what is an action plan if there's no monitoring? There's the monitoring framework with revised indicators on resource use to really also capture consumption and material footprint. And I wanted to give here 2 examples at the national level from 2 member states, France and Germany, in terms of how this policy is actually being implemented on the ground. So the first one is the so-called repairability index in France, which was introduced a year ago. And this gives an information on how repairable 5 categories of products are based on 5 criteria. So the categories of products are laptops, smartphones, washing machine, TVs, and lawnmowers. And the criteria is documentation, disassembly, availability of spare parts, the price of spare parts, and then product-specific characteristics, such as in the case of laptops or mobile phones or TVs, the software. And what this index does is that it measures this criteria for the 5 categories of products on an index from 0 to 10, 0 being the worst and 10 being the best. And there's a change in color for every 2 points, as you can see here. And that gives the consumer an idea of how repairable the product is on this scale, according to these criteria. And we can already see that we start talking not only about repairability, but also durability and how long-lasting a product is. The French authorities are planning to replace this index of repairability with one of durability from 2024. So this will look at how reliable, how long-lasting a product is, and also will keep this scale from 0 to 10 on the repairability aspect of the product. And in 2024, the authorities will also get a chance to revise the current repairability index if that's needed. And we can move now to a very different sectors, to the wastewater management sector. This time, Germany is implementing a policy on recycling phosphorus from wastewater. This was introduced in 2017 and basically obliges operators of wastewater treatment plants that are bigger than 50,000 people equivalent to recover phosphorus from sludge. Of course, there's a transition period. There are substantial investments that need to be done, and there is also a technological assessment that needs to be done to see what kind of technologies are suitable for each plant. This transition period is for 12 years for larger plants, more than 100,000 people equivalent, and 15 years for smaller plants. So by next year, all operators of wastewater treatment plants larger than 50,000 person equivalent, they have to submit this technology assessment basically to show to the authorities what kind of recycling concept they're thinking about. And a big thing here is that this ordinance was implemented because the estimates show it can replace 50 to 60% of the phosphorus imports. And EU as a whole is a net importer of phosphate fertilizers. It's more than 80% dependent on imports coming from abroad, if not more than 90%. And that's why phosphorus has been for quite some time now on the Commission's critical raw material list that I was mentioning before. So I mentioned the European Green Deal as really a forceful policy that's moving a lot of things around. And that's because a third of the next generation EU recovery plan and the EU's usual multi-annual financial framework, which is the usual budget, is planned to go to actions related to the European Green Deal package. And the European Green Deal has 3 broad aims. One of them is decarbonization by 2050. The other one is economic growth decoupled from resource use. And the other one is no person and no place left behind. But we know a thing, right? I mean, we have so many studies showing that in the current state, in the current business as usual state, we are not en route to achieve decarbonization by 2050. We're nowhere near. Actually, the emissions are increasing. Also, there is no evidence that the economic growth we're experiencing is decoupling at the rate we need from resource use. And we also know that socioeconomic inequalities have been increasing and that the current pandemic has been actually exacerbating inequalities in Europe and abroad. So what I'm trying to say here is that while the European Green Deal mobilizes a lot of resources and has ambitious aims, this will require systemic transformation and a move away from the business as usual that we have today, and that is guaranteed not to achieve those aims. And this was a topic of a study from Systemic and the Club of Rome in 2020. So when the Green Deal was launched, and what it shows is that we really need to think systemically and redefine a lot of the values and the concepts on which we are basing our economy on. So we need to redefine prosperity, resource use, progress, metrics, competitiveness, and so on and so forth. And this really shows that we have a lot of work to do. And this report is actually building on, let's say, an increasing wave of new economic thinking that tells us, well, we need to meet our social needs, right? We need to decrease socioeconomic inequalities, but we need to do this within the biophysical limits of the planet, within the so-called planetary boundaries. So perhaps you're familiar with the figure on the right, which is donut economics, and says exactly that what we need now is not an economy based on growth only, but we need an economy that provides for the people while providing ecological well-being. And again, the data we're seeing is nowhere near this. This is a study on the left that was just published a few days ago. And what it does, it quantifies one of the planetary boundaries here on the right, chemical pollution, which was not quantified before. And the results are, as many expected, that we have exceeded this planetary boundary by a lot as well. So we are overshooting quite a lot of these planetary boundaries, and some of the authors of the study have pointed out our circular economy as really a good way forward to reduce the consumption of materials, to make products longer lasting, so we don't need to waste so much, and we don't need to extract more raw materials. Circular economy to really reduce the material footprint. But again, this circular economy has to, of course, also provide, as you can see here on the right, to the social and environmental needs of the society, and not just be closing the loop for purely economic reasons. And that's all we're doing. So there's more and more awareness in this, in terms of policy also. As we've seen, it has been progressing to a certain extent, and a lot in academia. And now there are also calls for looking at the implication of circular economy in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of employment, in terms of gender equity. But of course, policy is usually lagging a bit behind on this. I want to take the chance to just mention that at Erasme, we have several projects on circular economy, and you're welcome to get in touch with us for more info. We recently got the Jean Monnet Circular Economy Chair. We're opening a Circular Economy Observatory at the University of Clermont-Auvergne in France. We have a partnership with the Millennium Institute to systemically assess circular economy at city and national level. Again, this is much needed now, and will of course depend on the indicators we're using. We're doing system dynamics training, and we have circular economy webinars. And I will conclude on that. So we're seeing that the circular economy concept, when it comes to policy, is advancing from material-based to some form of society-based. This is more prevalent in academia and at the concept level. There's a diversity of scale, sectors, and stakeholders. I gave 2 examples of member state policies just to exemplify how the circular economy action plan is actually being implemented by member states. But of course, there are local initiatives, there are industrial parks, implementing industrial symbiosis, for instance, and there are other regional, EU-wide initiatives too. The Green Deal is a major driver for circular economy and will be in the coming decade. But again, its success in providing for the society and for the environment depends on how transformative and how outside of box it will be. And again, it goes back a bit to the monitoring framework, right? So what kind of indicators will we use? What are we measuring when we're talking about circular economy? And something else that is driving research on circular economy, and of course is driving policy too, both at EU and global level, is of course the race to decarbonize and the breach of planetary boundaries that we're seeing. And this is very likely to push more circular economy as a solution at both EU and global level. So thanks so much for listening. Feel free to get in touch with us, and we're very happy to answer questions together with Manuel now. Morteza, you have a question.
Yeah, I mean, logically, I shouldn't ask a question as a moderator, but it was a very interesting topic. So I have a lot of questions actually. You explained very interesting concepts. I mean, the issue of increasing waste and other things. I mean, this is my personal observation. When I'm looking at consumer goods, for example, automobiles, cars, they are getting more complex. They're adding a lot of stuff like processors, sensors, other things to that. And I heard a report, in a report I saw that the reliability rate is decreasing, products are getting more complex, they break much faster, they are much harder to recycle or repair because of this situation. And I was wondering why, for example, the European industry, for example, car manufacturing industry is going to that direction. Then I was thinking about the fact that everybody around the globe is doing that. So if they want to stay competitive, they need to do this. So how do you think that European Commission should address these issues?
Do you want to start, Manuel, or should I answer first?
Yeah, you can start, and then I.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Morteza. And well, for instance, I was showing this repairability index, right, for products in France. Of course, automobiles are not there, but the concept itself is really good and is linked to the eco design initiative that's been launched at the European level, which kind of really presses us to move away a bit from this planned obsolescence of, you have to replace the product after 2-3 years. If the product breaks down, you either don't have the spare parts, or it's very difficult to repair it, or it's very expensive. So the purpose of this is really to, and there's a number of policies working towards that, is to actually move away from this and make it easier to repair, make it more durable, and hopefully that will happen. Of course, as I was mentioning, we're also talking about, we want to transition to electric vehicles, for instance, and that's not an easy technology, is it? So it will also depend on how we find the balance between repairability, durability, and those high-tech products that, well, some of them we need for decarbonization. And I think the Commission is working on it through this eco-design and the newer circular economy actions.
And do you think that the European industries would comply or collaborate?
Sorry?
Do you think that the European industries, if the factories, for example, would comply and would like collaborate on these initiatives?
Well, yeah, it will depend a lot on whether they are legally binding or not, of course. But I think we're also seeing a trend of recognition that we want this kind of products and not the kind of products that break down. And it will also depend, for instance, on how do we invest, right? So, for instance, if a state decides to give more subsidies to I don't know, an industry that's following these eco-design principles, then other industries will probably follow. And usually, you know how it's in industry, like if an industry takes leadership and is proactive in going the extra mile for eco-design, for instance, others will also follow. At least that's my optimistic take.
And just to complement, to build on that, I think also it's an interesting question. And it makes me remember a study that I just read regarding the incentives. When we talk about these incentives to apply circular economy, and we see that market-driven, which are those incentives that are applied and encouraged by the companies, are more related to eco-efficiency incentives in the circular economy. But as you correctly said, Morteza, those that came into the design, into the products, because they are defined by the consumers, are hardly pushed by the companies itself. So then it came the complementarity of the policies, policy-driven incentives, to make to define a pathway in which the companies, I mean the main direction of those industries should be defined. That's my my answer. I see there's another raised hand. Let's see, Marika Fedoruk.
Yeah, hi, Marichka.
Marichka. Hey, hello.
Maria, it's easily. Yeah, I'm very glad to see you guys, and very happy that you are actually working in the same sphere I'm also now working, and that was a big surprise for me actually. And what I can tell, I'm working in NGO as a lead of circular economy direction. And what we are trying to do, I'm located in Ukraine right now, in Ivano-Frankivsk, it's on the west of Ukraine. And what we are trying to do now, that we are trying to implement circular economy on the local level. So we are trying to work together with municipality. And I have to say that in Ukraine, all this circular economy movement is just starting. It's like in EU in 2015, I guess. But of course, as far as we have examples from European Union, then it's developing quite fast. But what I can say that, for example, from my experience with local authorities, it's very difficult to communicate about circular economy and to implement it, because they have their patterns. And to implement something new, like new models, new techniques or some innovations, is very difficult for them because it's too complicated. You need to invest a lot of money, and you really don't know if it will work or not, because all of this circular economy ideas and models, they are very fresh, very new, and we don't know how it will work in the end. So now we are working with a Netherlands company, Metabolic. They develop vision for our innovative center. It's a huge, huge building for 40,000 square meters in the city center of our city, and it was a factory. And now we are trying to renovate it as an innovation center for business and for education, for scientific purposes. And so it's like huge, huge project. And so they made a vision for us, and we are looking forward to have a strategy with them. And also they made a strategy of cycle economy for Gdańsk and for Lublin and Krakow in Poland. And my big goal, big idea is to have this strategy also for our city, not only for this innovative center, but for the whole city. So I will get in touch with you for sure. Maybe you will help me to implement this huge idea, because as far now, municipality is not is not asking for research in circular economy sphere. All the researches mostly are done by NGOs. So NGOs are like moving circular economy movement in Ukraine. And so that's why we really need help to convince municipality. We are starting on this level. And then, of course, on the state level, we can see some changes as well. But yeah, I think we need to support, and maybe you have an examples how this transition was done on a local level, on a municipality level, maybe in EU countries somewhere.
Yeah, I think thanks a lot, and really good to see, Marichka, that you're working in circular economy too, and good to see you again, by the way. I think also Manuel has a lot of experience in industrial symbiosis at the local level, if we're talking about that part. But definitely get in touch with both of us, and we're more than happy to talk more about it. Yeah, it's really interesting what you're doing in Ukraine.
Thank you.
Manuel, you're muted.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. No, and just to thank you, Marisa, for being here and for joining the webinar. I think we have a lot of research subjects in common and topics of interest on circular economy. So yeah, we're really happy to share what we are doing. We are our perspectives also. Yeah, as Ed just said, when we talk about this new paradigm, I think that we need to redefine a lot of concepts, and that's why many concepts coming from circular economy framework are having problems to get acceptance in the policy sphere and in the business sphere also. So we need to deal with that and to identify and to create even the good measure, even quantitative or qualitative ways to measure and to monitor new concepts to move forward. Thank you.
And also, I definitely want your presentations, because the visualization, the data explanation was very good. And as far as we communicate a lot about circular economy for our citizens, for authorities, for municipality, we really need this good visualization to talk about circular economy.
Right, definitely.
I think I'll send my presentation to our Lithuanian colleagues, and yeah.
Yeah,
we have a thank you, Marichka. Thank you for the intervention. I think maybe I don't know.
There was a question in chat, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll read it for you, Manuel. EU has the ability and resources to invest in recycling capabilities, but don't you think there is a lot of bottlenecks in waste collection? To be accurate, not enough waste collected. How could this be solved? Do you want to have a first go?
I think this is a question for you
Okay.
in policy.
Well, I think that in fact, a lot of the waste is being collected at the EU level. It's just a matter of discrepancy between, let's say, West and Northern Europe and Central and Eastern Europe, where the waste collections are lower. And we see this a bit also in some countries in Southern Europe. So again, as far as I can see it, the policy at the EU level is okay, but then it's up to the member state to implement those policies. So every time you have a directive on waste management, for instance, coming from the EU, a lot of the, let's say, implementation plan is just up to the member state and whether the member state can do a good job at that or not. So I would say that maybe that's where the bottleneck lies, the kind of approach that the member state will take, how realistic the implementation plan is, and if it's not copy paste, but it really takes into account the local and regional challenges that you find in every country. I hope that answers.
I think I will also build on that a bit. I also think that it's important to add to this that there are not a single solution, because when we talk about circular economy, we're not talking just about recycling. So when you're collecting this waste, then you need to think according to a diagnostic that is based on the territory, should decide what is the best or the better, because could be several possible solutions regarding reuse, recycling, refurbishing, including in other business models like the industrial symbiosis. So instead of talking about waste, we change that mindset and start talking about byproducts or co-products. And then I think that this is also what is missing here, trying to think into different possibilities or strategies to talk about this issue.
That's actually a very good point on really redefining how we look at waste and making more of a resource out of it. Yeah.
I think we run out of time. It was a really good discussion. Thank you all of you who joined this joint webinar, the first of this kind. And thank you also you, Ed, for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.